Standing in that sterile courtroom, watching my father's smug expression as the judge read his will aloud, I felt my world shatter into 1,000 pieces. The 3 vacation homes in the Florida Keys, along with the investment portfolio, worth $2.7 million, shall be distributed equally among my sons. Sons, not children. Sons, after 28 years of being Daddy's little princess, after sacrificing my career to care for him through cancer, after believing I was his favorite child, I discovered the most devastating truth of my life. My name, Seraphina Blackwood, appeared nowhere in that document. Absolutely nowhere. The man I had worshipped, defended, and devoted my entire adult life to had erased me completely from his legacy, leaving everything to my 2 lazy brothers who barely visited him once a year. But wait, where are you watching this family revenge story unfold from today? If this betrayal already has your blood boiling, hit that like button because you won't believe what I discovered next about my family's dark secrets. And definitely subscribe because this revenge story gets so much more twisted than you can imagine. Trust me, by the end of this, you'll see exactly how karma works in the most unexpected ways. The funeral reception at our family estate felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. My brothers Marcus and Theodore walked around like they owned the place, which technically they now did. Marcus, the older one at 32, had always been the golden boy despite his gambling addiction and 3 failed businesses that Dad had bailed him out of repeatedly. Theodore, 29, was somehow even worse. A trust fund baby who had never worked a day in his life and spent his time traveling Europe on Dad's credit cards. Sarah, sweetheart, you know Dad always loved you. My stepmother Patricia said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy as she approached me in the kitchen. He just believed in traditional values. Sons carry on the family name. Traditional values. From a woman who had married my father 6 months after my mother's funeral when I was 12 years old. The next morning, I drove to Dad's estate to collect my personal belongings, assuming I'd have at least a few days before my brothers moved in. Instead, I found Marcus there with a realtor already planning to flip the house. "Oh, hey, Sarah," he said casually, not even looking up from the property evaluation papers. "We're putting this on the market next week. Patricia's moving to her condo in Boca." Next week? I stared at him in disbelief. Dad's been gone for 3 days. "Look, it's business," Theodore chimed in, emerging from Dad's study with a box of documents. "The sooner we liquidate everything, the sooner we can reinvest. Dad would have wanted us to be smart about this." That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Theodore was carrying Dad's private filing cabinet, the one he'd always kept locked, the one that contained his business records and personal papers. "What are you doing with those files?" I demanded. "Estate stuff," Marcus answered vaguely. "Accountant needs everything organized." But I knew my father's organizational system better than anyone. I had been his unofficial assistant for years, helping him manage his real estate investments and construction company. Those files contained something they didn't want me to see. That evening, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Dad had always been secretive about his business dealings, but he'd trusted me with more information than anyone else in the family. I remembered countless conversations where he'd mentioned setting everything up for the future and making sure the family legacy continues. I decided to visit his longtime business partner, Robert Castellanos, who had known our family for over 2 decades. Robert's office was downtown, and when I arrived, his secretary immediately ushered me in. "Seraphina, I'm so sorry for your loss," Robert said, but I could see something troubled in his expression. "I have to ask you something, and please be honest with me. Did your father ever mention changing his will recently?" "No, never." "Why?" Robert pulled out a folder and placed it on his desk. "Because 3 months ago, your father came to me asking about liquidating some assets. He wanted to set up a trust fund for you. He was very specific about making sure you'd be financially secure for life. He said he was worried about your brother's spending habits and wanted to protect your inheritance. The room started spinning. A trust fund. But the will? That's what's bothering me, Robert continued. He also mentioned he was concerned about Patricia's influence on the boys. He suspected she was feeding them information about his business and encouraging them to pressure him about the inheritance. He even said he was thinking about hiring a private investigator. I felt sick. Robert, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Do you think it's possible that someone influenced him to change his will? Robert was quiet for a long moment. Seraphina, your father's signature on the will that was read in court. I've seen his signature thousands of times on business documents. The one on that will look different to me. Shakier. Almost like... He trailed off. Like what? Like someone guided his hand while he was heavily medicated. The pieces were starting to fall into place. Dad had been on strong pain medications during his final months. There were days when he was barely conscious, and Patricia had insisted on limiting his visitors, claiming he needed rest. She had been his primary caregiver, controlling who saw him and when. And my brothers had suddenly started visiting more frequently during those final weeks, which had surprised me at the time. Robert, I think they manipulated him when he was vulnerable. I said, my voice shaking with anger. I think Patricia and my brothers conspired to change his will while he was too sick to fully understand what he was signing. If that's true, Seraphina, then what happened to your father wasn't just inheritance fraud. It was elder abuse. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Robert's words and Dad's behavior during his final months. The more I remembered, the more suspicious everything seemed. Dad had always been sharp as a tack, even while fighting cancer. But during those last few weeks, whenever I tried to discuss business or financial matters with him, Patricia would quickly change the subject or suggest he needed to rest. I decided to take action. The next morning, I contacted Daniel Morrison, an attorney who specialized in estate disputes and elder law. When I explained my suspicions, he immediately arranged a meeting for that afternoon. What you're describing sounds like a textbook case of undue influence and possible fraud, Daniel said after hearing my story. But we'll need evidence. Do you have any documentation of your father's original intentions? Robert mentioned that Dad was planning to set up a trust for me. There might be paperwork at his office. Good. We'll also need to examine the circumstances under which the will was signed. Who witnessed it? Was your father mentally competent at the time? Were there any medical records from that period? Over the next week, Daniel and I began building our case. Robert provided documentation showing Dad's inquiries about the trust fund, including email exchanges where Dad expressed concerns about his son's financial irresponsibility. We also obtained Dad's medical records, which showed he was on heavy doses of morphine and other pain medications during the final month of his life. Medications that could significantly impair judgment and cognitive function. But the real breakthrough came when I remembered something crucial. Dad had installed a security system in his house 2 years earlier, including cameras in his study where important documents were typically signed. I called the security company, hoping against hope that they might still have recordings from the day the will was signed. Ma'am, we typically keep recordings for 90 days unless there's a specific request to preserve them, the technician told me. But let me check. Actually, it looks like there's an extended storage request on file for your father's account. The recordings are still available. My hands were trembling as I called Daniel with the news. This could be the smoking gun we need, he said. If we can prove your father was coerced or too impaired to understand what he was signing, we can challenge the will's validity. 2 days later, Daniel and I sat in his office watching the security footage on his laptop. The video showed Dad in his study, looking frail and confused with Patricia hovering over him. Marcus and Theodore were there too, which surprised me because I hadn't known they were present during the signing. In the recording, we could see Patricia pointing to places on the document where Dad needed to sign, essentially guiding his hand. Dad appeared disoriented, asking several times what he was signing. Patricia's voice was barely audible, but we could make out her saying things like, "Just some paperwork, honey," and "The lawyer said it's important." Most damaging of all the video showed Marcus actually holding Dad's hand steady while he signed the document. At one point, Dad looked up and said something that made Patricia quickly lean down and whisper in his ear, after which Dad nodded weakly and continued signing. "This is definitely elder abuse," Daniel said, pausing the video. "Your father clearly didn't understand what he was signing, and they took advantage of his medicated state. We have grounds for both criminal charges and a civil lawsuit to overturn the will." But I wanted more than just to recover my inheritance. I wanted justice for what they had done to Dad in his final days. "Daniel, I want to expose them publicly. I want everyone to know what kind of people my brothers and stepmother really are." "Are you sure about that Seraphina going public means this will get messy? Your family will fight back hard." "They stopped being my family the day they decided to steal from a dying man," I replied. "Let them fight. I have the truth on my side." The next morning, I did something that would change everything. I contacted Sarah Mitchell, an investigative journalist who had written several exposés about elder abuse and family fraud. I provided her with copies of the security footage, medical records, and documentation of Dad's original intentions. Sarah was immediately interested in the story. "This is exactly the kind of systematic elder abuse that needs to be exposed," Sarah told me during our meeting. "Would you be willing to go on record I'm thinking a full investigative piece that shows how easily this can happen to any family?" "Absolutely. But I want to make sure the article comes out before they have a chance to dispose of any evidence or liquidate Dad's assets." Sarah moved quickly. Within a week, her article titled "The Ultimate Betrayal: How a Stepmother and Sons Allegedly Stole a Dying Man's Legacy" appeared on the front page of the local newspaper and was picked up by several national news outlets. The article included still images from the security footage and quotes from Robert about Dad's original intentions. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Patricia called me within hours of the article's publication, screaming about defamation and threatening lawsuits. Marcus and Theodore were furious, claiming I was destroying the family's reputation over money. But the public response was overwhelmingly supportive. Comments poured in from readers sharing similar stories of elder abuse and family betrayal. More importantly, the article caught the attention of the district attorney's office. 2 days after publication, I received a call from Assistant District Attorney Lisa Rodriguez, who specialized in white-collar crime and elder abuse cases. "Ms. Blackwood, we'd like to open a criminal investigation into your father's case. Would you be willing to cooperate?" "Absolutely," I said without hesitation. "I'll do whatever it takes to get justice for my father." The criminal investigation moved faster than I had expected. Within days of the DA's office opening the case, Detective James Crawford was assigned as the lead investigator. He was a seasoned detective who had handled numerous elder abuse cases, and his experience showed immediately. "The security footage you provided is compelling evidence," Detective Crawford told me during our first meeting, "but we need to build a comprehensive case. I'll need to interview everyone who had contact with your father during his final months, including medical staff caregivers and any other witnesses." As the investigation progressed, I began connecting with people I hadn't expected would become my allies. Dr. Elizabeth Harper. Dad's oncologist contacted me after seeing the news article. "I always had concerns about your father's care situation," she told me during a phone call. "There were several appointments where he seemed confused about decisions he had supposedly made regarding his treatment. I documented my concerns, but I wasn't sure what to do about them." Dr. Harper's medical notes became crucial evidence. She had recorded multiple instances where Dad seemed unaware of conversations that Patricia claimed they'd had about his care. More importantly, she had noted that Dad's cognitive function appeared to decline rapidly whenever he was around Patricia and his sons, but improved when he was alone or with medical staff. Another unexpected ally emerged when Maria Santos, Dad's former housekeeper, reached out to me. Maria had worked for our family for 15 years before Patricia suddenly fired her 6 months before Dad's death. "Miss Seraphina, I have been wanting to call you since Mr. Blackwood passed," Maria said when we met at a coffee shop. "There were things happening in that house that were not right." Why, Maria's testimony was devastating for Patricia and my brothers. She described how Patricia had gradually isolated Dad from his friends and longtime employees. She witnessed Patricia going through Dad's private papers and making phone calls about updating documents. Most shocking of all, Maria had overheard conversations between Patricia and my brothers about securing their future and making sure Dad made the right decisions. "Mrs. Patricia, she would send me away whenever the lawyer came to the house," Maria explained. "She said it was private family business, but one time I came back because I forgot my keys, and I heard your father saying he was confused. He kept asking what he was signing, and Mrs. Patricia kept telling him to just trust her." The investigation also revealed financial irregularities that went beyond the will. Detective Crawford discovered that Patricia had been systematically transferring money from Dad's accounts to her personal accounts during his illness. She had used her power of attorney to write checks to herself for caregiver expenses that were clearly excessive and undocumented. She was stealing from him while caring for him, Detective Crawford informed me. "We're talking about over $200,000 in unauthorized transfers during the 6 months before his death." But the most powerful ally came from an unexpected source. Janet Williamson, the notary who had witnessed Dad's will signing, contacted the DA's office voluntarily after seeing the news coverage. When Detective Crawford interviewed her, she admitted that she had felt uncomfortable during the signing but hadn't known what to do about her concerns. "The gentleman seemed very confused and kept asking what he was signing," Janet told Detective Crawford in her official statement. "The woman there, Patricia, kept answering for him and telling him it was just routine paperwork. I should have asked more questions, but they assured me everything was legitimate. Looking back, I realize I should have refused to notarize the document." Janet's testimony was particularly damaging because as a licensed notary, she was trained to identify situations where someone might not be capable of understanding what they were signing. Her admission that Dad seemed confused and that Patricia was controlling the conversation provided professional validation of what the security footage showed. As more evidence accumulated, I realized we weren't just dealing with a simple case of inheritance fraud. This was a sophisticated scheme that had been planned and executed over months. Patricia had systematically isolated Dad, manipulated his medical condition, and coordinated with my brothers to ensure they would inherit everything. The emotional toll of uncovering these details was enormous, but I found strength in the growing network of people who supported the investigation. Robert continued providing business records that showed the extent of Dad's original plans for my inheritance. Dr. Harper offered to testify about Dad's cognitive state and Patricia's suspicious behavior. Maria was willing to share everything she had witnessed in the house. Most importantly, the public attention generated by Sarah's article brought additional witnesses forward. 2 of Dad's longtime friends contacted me to share their own concerns about how Patricia had gradually cut them off from visiting Dad during his illness. His former business associates reported similar experiences of being told Dad was too sick to take their calls or meet with them. "Your father was building a case in his own mind before he died," Robert told me during one of our strategy meetings. He had started documenting things that bothered him about Patricia's behavior. I think he suspected something was wrong, but died before he could do anything about it. By this point, I felt confident that we had enough evidence to not only overturn the will, but also secure criminal convictions against Patricia and my brothers. The DA's office was moving forward with charges of elder abuse fraud and theft. The civil lawsuit to invalidate the will was progressing simultaneously. But just as everything seemed to be falling into place, I received a phone call that would shake my confidence and test everything I thought I knew about loyalty and trust. The call came from someone within my own alliance network, someone I had trusted completely, and it changed the entire trajectory of the case in a way I never could have anticipated. The call came on a Thursday evening just as I was feeling confident about our case. It was Dr. Harper, and her voice sounded strained and nervous. "Seraphina, we need to talk. Can you meet me tomorrow morning? It's important." Something in her tone made my stomach drop. "Is everything okay? Is there a problem with your testimony?" "Just, please meet me at the hospital cafeteria at 8 a.m. And Seraphina, don't tell anyone about this conversation. Not your lawyer, not the detective. No one." I barely slept that night, my mind racing through possibilities. Had Patricia gotten to Dr. Harper? Had she discovered something that would hurt our case? When I arrived at the hospital cafeteria the next morning, Dr. Harper looked exhausted and conflicted. "I need to tell you something that's going to change everything," she began, her hands shaking slightly. "But first you need to understand that I never intended for things to go this far. When I saw that article about elder abuse, I thought I was doing the right thing by supporting your case." "What are you talking about?" Dr. Harper took a deep breath. "Patricia contacted me 3 days ago. She offered me $50,000 to change my testimony. She said she had evidence that could destroy my medical practice if I didn't cooperate." My heart sank. "Please tell me you didn't take the money." "I didn't take it," she said quickly. "But Seraphina, what she showed me, it's complicated. She has records of some medical decisions I made regarding your father's pain medication that could be interpreted as questionable." "What kind of records?" "During your father's final weeks, I prescribed higher doses of morphine than were strictly necessary. I did it because he was suffering, and I wanted to keep him comfortable. But if someone wanted to argue that I was over-medicating him to keep him compliant for document signings, they could make a case for it." The room was spinning. "Are you saying you might have accidentally helped them?" "I'm saying that Patricia is smarter than we gave her credit for. She's been documenting everything, building her own defense. She knows about every witness we have, every piece of evidence we've gathered. Someone has been feeding her information about our investigation." "Someone like who?" Dr. Harper's next words hit me like a physical blow. "Like Detective Crawford." I stared at her in disbelief. "That's impossible. He's leading the investigation." Patricia showed me text messages between her and Crawford. He's been updating her on every development in the case. Every witness interview, every piece of evidence we've provided, every strategy session with the DA's office. She knows everything. The betrayal was so complete and unexpected that I couldn't process it at first. Detective Crawford, the man I had trusted with my father's justice, had been working with Patricia all along. Why would he do that? Money, I assume. Patricia has access to your father's accounts. She could have paid him a significant amount to sabotage the investigation from the inside. I felt physically sick. How long has this been going on? Based on what she showed me, probably from the very beginning. Crawford reached out to Patricia before he even contacted you for your first interview. She's been one step ahead of us the entire time. The implications were staggering. Every piece of evidence we had gathered, every witness we had found, every strategy we had developed had been immediately shared with Patricia. She had been able to prepare counter-arguments, influence potential witnesses, and build her own defense while appearing to be the target of our investigation. "There's more," Dr. Harper continued. "Patricia claims she has evidence that you knew about your father's will change months before he died. She says she has email exchanges between you and your father discussing his decision to leave everything to your brothers." "That's impossible. Those emails don't exist." "She showed me printed copies. They look legitimate, Seraphina. If she presents those in court, it will look like you knew you were being disinherited and fabricated this entire elder abuse story for revenge." I realized that Patricia hadn't just been defending herself. She had been building an offensive strategy to destroy my credibility and my case. "The emails are fake. They have to be." "Maybe they are, but they look real enough to create reasonable doubt. And with Crawford feeding her information about our case, she's been able to anticipate every move we've made." My entire world felt like it was collapsing. The detective I trusted was corrupt. The evidence I thought was ironclad could be countered. The allies I had counted on were being compromised one by one. "What do I do now?" "I don't know," Dr. Harper admitted. "But Patricia made it clear that if I don't change my testimony to support her version of events, she'll report me to the medical board and claim I was over-medicating patients. My career would be over." "So you're abandoning the case?" "I'm trying to protect myself and my family. I have 2 children, Seraphina. I can't lose my medical license over this." After Dr. Harper left, I sat in that hospital cafeteria feeling more alone than I had ever felt in my life. The alliance network I had built was crumbling. My main witness was being blackmailed into silence. The detective leading the investigation was corrupt, and Patricia had been playing chess while I thought we were playing checkers. I called Daniel Morrison my attorney, but even he seemed shaken when I explained what Dr. Harper had told me. "If Crawford has been compromising the investigation, then every piece of evidence we've gathered could be tainted," he said. "Patricia's lawyers will argue that the entire case is fruit of the poisonous tree." "What about the security footage that's still solid evidence?" "Is it if Crawford knew about it from the beginning and shared that information with Patricia? She's had weeks to prepare an explanation. She could claim your father was lucid and understood exactly what he was signing. Without Dr. Harper's medical testimony about his cognitive impairment, the footage becomes much less compelling." That evening, I received a text message from an unknown number. "You should have accepted your father's final wishes. Stop this investigation now, or you'll lose everything you have left. This is your only warning." I knew it was from Patricia, but I also knew there was no way to prove it. She was careful, strategic, and apparently had been planning this defense for months. I felt trapped, outmaneuvered, and completely isolated. But as I sat in my apartment that night, staring at that threatening text message, something inside me shifted. Yes, I had been betrayed by people I trusted. Yes, Patricia had been more cunning than I had anticipated, but I still had the truth on my side even if proving it had become more complicated. I realized that I needed to stop playing Patricia's game and start playing my own. If she wanted to escalate this battle, then I would show her what real determination looked like. The war for my father's justice was far from over, but I was going to need to find new allies and develop new strategies. The next morning, I made a decision that would either save my case or destroy it completely. I was going to expose Detective Crawford's corruption and find evidence of Patricia's crimes that even a compromised investigation couldn't ignore. But first, I needed to find someone I could trust, absolutely someone who couldn't be bought or intimidated. The breakthrough came from a source I never expected. While researching Detective Crawford's background, trying to understand how Patricia had corrupted him, I discovered something that would change everything. Crawford had been investigated 3 years earlier for taking bribes in another elder abuse case, but the charges were dropped due to insufficient evidence. The investigating officer on that case was Detective Samantha Rivera, who had since been promoted to the Internal Affairs Division. I contacted Detective Rivera directly, bypassing the normal channels that Crawford could monitor. When I explained the situation, her response was immediate and intense. Crawford was supposed to be on administrative review, not handling active cases, she told me during our clandestine meeting at a diner across town. If he's working your father's case, someone made a decision to overlook his previous problems. Can you investigate him? I'm already starting an internal investigation based on what you've told me, but I need evidence of his communication with Patricia. Do you have any proof of their relationship? Only what Dr. Harper told me about seeing text messages. Detective Rivera leaned forward. Here's what we're going to do. Internal Affairs is going to launch a parallel investigation into Crawford's handling of your father's case. We'll examine his phone records, his financial accounts, and his case notes. If he's been taking bribes or sharing confidential information, we'll find the evidence. Within 48 hours, Detective Rivera's investigation yielded explosive results. Crawford's bank records showed 3 large cash deposits totaling $75,000 during the weeks he had been working on Dad's case. His phone records revealed dozens of calls and text messages to Patricia's personal number, including communications that occurred before he officially contacted me about the investigation. But the most damning evidence came from Crawford's department-issued laptop. The IT forensics team discovered that Crawford had been forwarding confidential case files to his personal email account, and from there, the files had been shared with an email address registered to Patricia. This is a clear violation of police protocols and potentially criminal conspiracy, Detective Rivera informed me. We're arresting Crawford today and reopening your father's case with a clean investigative team. The news of Crawford's arrest sent shockwaves through Patricia's carefully constructed defense. Suddenly, all the information she had been receiving about our investigation was cut off, and her lawyers were scrambling to adjust their strategy. More importantly, Crawford's corruption actually strengthened our case by proving that Patricia had been actively working to obstruct justice. But the real game changer came when Detective Rivera introduced me to someone who would become my most powerful ally, FBI agent Michael Torres, who specialized in financial crimes and elder abuse conspiracies. Agent Torres had been monitoring Crawford's activities as part of a broader investigation into police corruption, and our case had caught his attention. What you've uncovered goes beyond simple inheritance fraud, Agent Torres explained during our first meeting. Patricia's scheme shows sophisticated financial planning and interstate activity that brings this under federal jurisdiction. We're talking about wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy charges that carry serious federal prison time. Agent Torres's investigation revealed the full scope of Patricia's crimes. She hadn't just stolen Dad's inheritance. She had been systematically looting his accounts for over a year. Using her power of attorney, she had transferred money to shell companies she had created in multiple states. She had also taken out life insurance policies on Dad without his knowledge, naming herself as the beneficiary. Your stepmother is running a sophisticated criminal enterprise, Agent Torres told me. This wasn't just opportunistic theft. This was a calculated long-term plan to strip your father of his entire estate. The FBI investigation also uncovered Patricia's criminal history that none of us had known about. She had been married twice before marrying Dad, and in both cases her elderly husbands had died under suspicious circumstances, leaving her their entire estates. The FBI was now reopening those cases as potential homicides. Are you saying Patricia might have killed my father? I asked, the thought too horrible to fully process. We're investigating that possibility. Your father's death certificate lists cancer as the cause, but given Patricia's pattern of behavior and the timing of his death relative to the will signing, we want a forensic pathologist to review the circumstances. The exhumation order came through 2 weeks later. The forensic examination revealed elevated levels of morphine in Dad's system that were inconsistent with his prescribed pain management regimen. While not definitively proving murder, the results suggested that Dad had been given additional doses of morphine beyond what Dr. Harper had prescribed. Someone was administering extra medication to your father during his final days, the forensic pathologist explained. The levels we found would have significantly impaired his cognitive function and could have accelerated his death. This discovery led to the most shocking revelation yet. Maria Santos, Dad's former housekeeper, remembered seeing Patricia giving Dad additional vitamins and supplements during her final weeks working at the house. When Agent Torres showed Maria photographs of various medications, she identified bottles of liquid morphine that Patricia had been secretly administering to Dad. Mrs. Patricia, she told me those were special vitamins to help Mr. Blackwood sleep better. Maria testified. She said the doctor recommended them, but she kept them in her purse, not with his regular medications. The evidence was now overwhelming. Patricia had been drugging Dad to keep him compliant, stealing his money systematically, manipulating his will while he was incapacitated, and possibly hastening his death to avoid detection. My brothers, while perhaps not aware of the full extent of Patricia's crimes, had clearly conspired with her to ensure they inherited everything. Agent Torres arrested Patricia on federal charges of wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, and elder abuse. Marcus and Theodore were arrested as co-conspirators. The arrests made national news with headlines describing it as one of the most sophisticated elder abuse schemes ever uncovered. But beyond the criminal charges, Agent Torres had helped me discover something that would restore my father's legacy and honor his original intentions. Hidden in one of Patricia's shell companies, the FBI found documents showing that Dad had indeed set up a trust fund for me exactly as Robert had described. Patricia had intercepted the paperwork and prevented the trust from being finalized, but the documentation proved Dad's true wishes. Your father was trying to protect you from exactly what ended up happening, Agent Torres told me as we reviewed the recovered documents. He suspected Patricia was manipulating your brothers, and he wanted to ensure you would be financially secure regardless of what happened to his will. The trust fund documents combined with all the evidence of Patricia's crimes provided the foundation for a complete legal victory. The fraudulent will was invalidated, Patricia's thefts were being reversed, and criminal justice was finally being served. But more than that, I had gained an ally in Agent Torres who understood that this case was about more than money. It was about honoring a father's love and protecting other vulnerable elderly people from similar predators. The trial became a media sensation that lasted 3 months. Every day I sat in that courtroom watching as the full scope of Patricia's crimes was laid bare before the jury. The evidence was overwhelming and devastating. The security footage showed Dad's confusion and Patricia's manipulation. The financial records revealed systematic theft totaling over $800,000. The medical evidence suggested Patricia had been drugging Dad to keep him compliant. Most damning of all, the FBI had uncovered Patricia's pattern of targeting and potentially murdering elderly wealthy men. Agent Torres testified about the sophisticated nature of Patricia's criminal enterprise. The defendant operated what can only be described as a serial predator scheme, targeting vulnerable elderly men with substantial assets, he told the jury. She would marry them, isolate them from family and friends, gradually take control of their finances, and ultimately arrange for them to die under circumstances that appeared natural but were actually the result of deliberate poisoning. Dr. Harper, despite her initial betrayal, ultimately testified truthfully about Dad's medical condition and Patricia's suspicious behavior. The corruption of Detective Crawford had actually helped our case by demonstrating that Patricia had actively obstructed justice and corrupted the investigation. Maria Santos's testimony about the secret medications was particularly powerful, showing the jury exactly how Patricia had maintained control over Dad during his final weeks. My brother's defense strategy was to claim they had been manipulated by Patricia and were unaware of her crimes. Marcus took the stand and tried to paint himself as another victim, claiming Patricia had convinced him that Dad wanted to leave everything to his sons because he believed in traditional inheritance patterns. Theodore's testimony was even less convincing, as he couldn't explain why he had participated in removing Dad's private files, or why he had never questioned Patricia's rapid moves to liquidate the estate. But the most powerful moment came when I took the stand to testify about my relationship with Dad and the impact of his betrayal. "My father was my hero," I told the jury, fighting back tears. "I spent my entire adult life taking care of him, supporting his business, and believing that family loyalty mattered above everything else." To discover that he had apparently cut me out of his will completely was devastating enough. But to learn that his final wishes had been manipulated while he was dying, that people he trusted had stolen from him and possibly killed him, was beyond comprehension. I explained how the investigation had revealed Dad's true intentions: his plans to set up a trust fund for me, his concerns about Patricia's influence, his attempts to protect his legacy from exploitation. "Patricia didn't just steal money," I continued. "She stole my father's final opportunity to show his love for me. She stole his dignity in death. She stole justice itself by corrupting the police investigation. But most of all, she stole years of my life that I spent believing my father didn't love me." The jury deliberated for only 6 hours. Patricia was found guilty on all charges: wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, elder abuse, and accessory to homicide in the deaths of her 2 previous husbands. She was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. Marcus received 8 years for conspiracy and fraud. Theodore received 5 years for his lesser role in the scheme. Detective Crawford was sentenced to 12 years for corruption, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. His conviction sent a message throughout the police department about the consequences of betraying public trust. The civil case was resolved even more decisively. The fraudulent will was completely invalidated, and I inherited Dad's entire estate as his only surviving legitimate heir. Patricia was ordered to repay all the money she had stolen, with interest and penalties totaling over $1.2 million. The 3 vacation homes in the Florida Keys, the investment portfolio, the family estate, and Dad's construction company all reverted to me. But beyond the financial victory, the case had broader implications. Agent Torres used the evidence we uncovered to identify and prosecute an entire network of individuals who specialized in elder abuse schemes. Patricia's case became a model for how law enforcement agencies could recognize and investigate sophisticated inheritance fraud. The media coverage also sparked important conversations about protecting elderly people from financial predators. I was invited to testify before Congress about strengthening elder abuse laws and improving police training for these types of cases. The Patricia Blackwood case became a case study in law enforcement academies and legal schools across the country. 6 months after the trial ended, I made a decision that would have made Dad proud. I established the Thomas Blackwood Foundation for Elder Justice, using a portion of my inheritance to fund legal assistance for families fighting inheritance fraud and elder abuse. The foundation also provides training for law enforcement agencies and supports research into preventing these crimes. Agent Torres left the FBI and became the foundation's Director of Investigations. Dr. Harper, despite her moment of weakness, became our medical consultant and has helped identify dozens of cases where elderly people were being medicated to facilitate financial abuse. Maria Santos now works as our community outreach coordinator, helping other domestic workers recognize and report signs of elder abuse. Robert Castellanos and I rebuilt Dad's construction company, implementing new ethical guidelines and creating employee protections that prevent the kind of systematic exploitation Patricia had attempted. The company now specializes in building affordable housing for seniors, carrying forward Dad's legacy of helping his community. Most surprisingly, I found my real family among these allies who had fought for justice alongside me. Agent Torres, Dr. Harper, Maria Robert Detective Rivera, and even Sarah Mitchell. The journalist who first exposed the story became my chosen family. We gather every year on the anniversary of Dad's death, not to mourn, but to celebrate the justice we achieved together and the lives we've been able to protect since then. The 3 vacation homes in the Florida Keys that Dad had wanted to leave to his sons became the Foundation's retreat center, where families dealing with elder abuse can find support and healing. It seemed fitting that the very properties my brothers had fought so hard to inherit became symbols of protection for vulnerable, elderly people. Looking back, I realized that Patricia's betrayal, as devastating as it was, ultimately led me to discover my true strength and purpose. Dad's legacy wasn't just the money he left behind. It was the example he set of fighting for what's right, even when the odds seem impossible. As I finish telling you this story, I want you to think about your own family dynamics and the elderly people in your life. Have you ever witnessed someone being isolated from their support network? Have you noticed suspicious changes in an elderly person's behavior or financial decisions? The signs of elder abuse are often subtle, but they're recognizable if you know what to look for. What would you have done if you discovered your family had betrayed you the way mine betrayed me? Would you have fought for justice, or would you have accepted the injustice to keep the peace? Drop a comment below and share your thoughts about family loyalty versus doing what's right when those two things conflict. If this story of family karma and justice resonated with you, please hit that like button to help other people find it. Subscribe to the channel because I'll be sharing more real stories about how justice prevails when good people refuse to give up. And share this video with someone who might need to hear that fighting for what's right is always worth it, even when it feels impossible. Thank you for listening to my story and for supporting the fight for elder justice. I hope that if you ever find yourself in a situation where you have to choose between family loyalty and doing what's right, you'll remember that sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to let injustice stand unopposed. The truth has a power all its own, and it will always find a way to surface no matter how deeply people try to bury it.